Hey everybody, how's it going? Josh here, and today we're going to talk about Ghidorah's origins and powers in this anime, or I guess animated, Godzilla Earth trilogy of sorts, because it's a much different take of Ghidorah than we've ever seen before, honestly, and to a certain extent this might be the most powerful version of Ghidorah we've seen as well, because this Ghidorah, instead of it being an alien from a different planet potentially, or an alien from an unknown region of space, or it being a genetically modified creature that then gets mutated, instead of it being anything like that, it's an extremely large, extremely powerful, worshipped as a god in its own right by an advanced alien race, being from another dimension, and actually not even another dimension, but voids between dimensions on a higher plane of existence. So it's an extremely powerful iteration of the character, and kind of going into this version of Ghidorah, like I said before, Ghidorah is a god of the XF people, and the XF people are extraordinarily advanced. You know, they have technology that allows them to do things like see the future, they say in Godzilla, the Planet Eater movie, and as well, they have technology that allows them to communicate with higher dimensional beings, which is how they first discover Ghidorah in the first place. Now, according to the director of the film, Ghidorah's design concept is basically Godzilla with a completely different evolution. Godzilla obviously is very bound to Earth. This is kind of a backstory for Ghidorah, where just like there's different subspecies that come from Godzilla's body or exposure to Godzilla in the surrounding environment, interpretation of Ghidorah in this movie is more or less those G organisms from a different reality, or different dimension I should say, different universe, whatever terminology you want to use. They evolved beyond their physical state, their physical body, in order to reach that higher level of dimension, that higher level, I guess, plane of existence, if you will. And as a result of that, and further evolving for hundreds of millions of years, and end up being creatures that exist in the void between dimensions as they're traveling to different dimensions, as we see and are strongly hinted at throughout this trilogy. And finally we get to see Ghidorah in his full-on, or not full glory, but partial glory, I guess you could say technically, when the XF finally use their rituals to communicate and basically call Ghidorah down, presumably destroy Earth and kill Godzilla along with it. Now, they look really similar to the Servums, which are a subspecies of Godzilla Earth. Like I said before, they were creatures that came off of the emergence of Godzilla Earth in this anime film universe. It's almost assumed at this point that the real origin of Ghidorah from this universe is Ghidorah was a Servum, and that Servum eventually kept evolving and eventually evolved beyond that plane of existence to be a higher dimensional being. And upon further evolving and getting more powerful over time, that being eventually became Ghidorah. So definitely a really interesting origin, especially an origin where Ghidorah potentially comes from Godzilla itself. That's very interesting. Another thing that kind of plays off with the whole Ghidorah-Godzilla relationship is that it's said that Ghidorah has consumed, or I guess killed, multiple Godzillas on multiple different planets. So they have this kind of weird pseudo-history amongst the two species where one kills the other. Ghidorah is seen basically as the ultimate end, the ultimate destruction beyond the natural destruction that is already symbolized by Godzilla. A really interesting characteristic about Ghidorah in this film is that as a result of him being a higher dimensional being, he's able to distort the physics around him because he's not bound by those native dimensional physics. And they actually say that in the movie, that the reason why certain things are different, like they can't sense Ghidorah and things like that with their different equipments, is because he's not bound by those laws of physics that rule and dictate that home dimension, that home universe that Ghidorah is invading. And this portrays him as essentially an energy-like being until he's bound to that universe. The way he even manifests in the first place in that universe is by an avatar that is called upon by someone who summons him through a ritual, and usually the ritual has sacrifices and things like that. Also at the same time, using that advanced technology to communicate with Ghidorah, those sacrifices are offered, and then from accepting those offered sacrifices, now when the summoner brings Ghidorah to that dimension, he's actually able to control Ghidorah to a certain extent. And in some ways, it's kind of said that Ghidorah sees through that summoner. So Ghidorah technically is still operating, still acting from that higher plane of existence. And they actually literally say that Ghidorah's actions, the reason why you can't really see what Ghidorah is doing or feel what Ghidorah is doing, and the reason why Ghidorah's actions aren't registering on Godzilla's vitals appropriately at first, is because those actions are still being done from that higher plane of existence. At the same time, if Ghidorah's around a being long enough, he can actually almost incorporate that being into his dimension and cause that creature, that object, whatever have you, adapt the characteristics and adapt the laws of the void that Ghidorah lives in. So at one point, Godzilla is being levitated basically by Ghidorah, and it's said that the reason why this is happening, because Godzilla has way too much mass to be flying around, but the reason why that's happening is because Godzilla, due to the exposure and being surrounded by Ghidorah for so long, he's slowly being kind of dragged into the plane of existence that Ghidorah comes from, and thus he's now losing his, reactivity to the laws of physics that he usually is dictated by. Now, Ghidorah is only able to actually be on Earth due to distortions in gravity that cause space-time wormholes, but also at the same time, when Godzilla fires a beam at him, he's able to redirect the beam's kind of trajectory. The reason why they say he does that is because he's bending the gravity around Godzilla's energy beams. So all in all, Ghidorah is extraordinarily powerful, as all this basically kind of says. I mean, it's really cool that we're getting an interpretation of Ghidorah that's kind of above and beyond any other interpretation we've received before, because they could have just done your traditional alien kind of thing, but instead they got really creative with it. Now, Ghidorah's main weakness seems to be that if you're able to kind of break the bond between Ghidorah and the person that summoned Ghidorah, Ghidorah temporarily becomes bound by the laws of that dimension, that universe, until he dissipates. And the way he dissipates is basically the space-time wormholes that opened up and allow Ghidorah to enter the universe. Those end up closing up, and Ghidorah kind of dissipates into little bits of energy. But in that period of time, in the middle of him dissipating, and when that process first begins, he becomes solid and is able to be interacted with, analyzed by technology, things like that. So it's actually a really interesting scene where they're finally able to sense Ghidorah technically with their technology when they couldn't before, and at the same time Godzilla is able to do stuff like hit Ghidorah with his tail, or actually hit Ghidorah with atomic breath. Comment below your guys' thoughts. What do you guys think about this version of Ghidorah? Do you think it's cool? Do you think it's not cool? Let us know what you think down below, and we'll see you guys later.